All right, so I think probably everybody knows who you are, Robert, but just in case they don't, one of the co-inventors of Erlang, and of course the creator of LFE. Robert and I have been working together for a while now, I guess. I did a quick calculation. I think I've been with the project now 2/3 of its lifetime.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Kind of fun.
For those who don't know, Duncan's the one who's written most of the documentation. If you go to the LFE.io site there, he's one who's behind most of the stuff you'll see there. So yes, you don't really want to see my documentation. It's sparse.
And in all the time that we've been together, we always end up talking about LFE and features and whatnot. And I don't have a chance to sort of ask Robert questions about LFE and OTP in conjunction with each other. And we thought this would be a nice opportunity to, not necessarily entirely LFE centric, because any answer to a good OTP question is a good answer for all Beam languages pretty much. But yeah, we thought it might be nice to have a little bit of LFE flavor with it, but also talk about OTP and the Beam and many other things.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's get started. Oh, and feel free to start. There's a bunch of questions that we've pre-prepared in the Q&A section, but feel free to add your own. I'll scroll back and forth, up and down to see if any have been added, and we'll hop in there. I think Robert's going to ask one or two himself as well. So.
Yeah, there are a couple others. Well, there's one very interesting I want to try and find out. Duncan's not going to get away from not telling me more about his system, so that's no escape.
Right.
Okay.
So the talk I gave yesterday he's referring to was about Undertone, and in fact, some of the questions I want to ask him are a result of me having to do so many crazy things in Undertone with OTP, and I wonder, did I do this right? So this might be a nice chance. And as I'm asking a question, wondering if I did something right, it might kick off a great question for you all as well. So feel free to ask yours. Let's see here. I guess starting from like when a system first comes up in terms of bringing up a whole OTP application, I want to start there. And let me first share my screen so we have something to look at. All right, so you should be able to see an Emacs window right now.
Yep.
All right, so my question here, I don't know how frowned upon this is, but I haven't found many use cases in the wild or examples in the wild of start phases, OTP start phases. And I'm in fact not actually really using, this is just a no-op function right now. But the app module that holds these functions does use this, and it does use the OSC clients, and of course it renders a banner finally. But there are several synchronous operations that I, wanted to do when the OTP system first came up, and wanted to ask you, is this in fact used very often? Is it discouraged?
I don't think it's discouraged.
Okay.
In any way, not that I've heard of. I myself have never used it.
Okay.
So it's for this simple type of things I'm building, I haven't had need of that.
All right.
It's been enough just to start up the supervision tree, maybe some initialization and start up inside.
Right. And that actually ties
the only example I've seen of using it, well, I haven't looked at your code behind it, but the only example I've seen didn't really need it in that sense. Yeah,
and in fact, like I mentioned, I'm not actually using it for the original intent that I thought, because the backends are getting started, like you said, in the init function of a supervision tree.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's, sorry, I can't. Just not something I've hit.
That's actually a useful answer in and of itself. Let me find that question. All right, where is it? There it is. Start phases. Okay, answered. And let me then switch to the next question. Where is it? Seems that no, that's going to be later. All right, I'll just open up the file here. It is the supervision tree itself, I believe. Yeah. So this is a question about complexity of systems. I have done several large-scale systems, some in Erlang, some in Clojure, some in Go. But one of the things that I have found in all of the languages has been very helpful to when it's a complicated system of systems, to have components that you can swap out easily via configuration. It's in my own personal experience, it's never been anything that would have been needed to be done during runtime. It's always something that would need to be done ahead of time, and then the system will start up and run forever with the selected components.
Yeah.
I do that here in Undertone because I have lots of different backends that I want to be able to support, but I only ever play with one particular backend at a time. And what this means is that when the system does come up and I'm adding things to a supervision tree, what I have decided to do here, and I don't know how correct this is have these conditional statements inside the init function of my supervision tree saying, hey, I'm going to add these children, these children are always going to be added. These children will only be added if these conditions are met in configuration, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a sensible thing to do? Is there a better approach?
Well, if you, I think that's fine if you can work that out at startup time with you're doing with your backend testing, comparing your backend here for different values, then it's fine, right? Then I don't see why not to do that.
Okay, so it's not like bad form to have.
I don't think so. No. Okay. If you know exactly how you want to run things when you start the system up, then just do it like that.
Okay,
that's good. Choose. And I mean, you always have the option to coming in later. If you find while the system is running, you want to add and remove things, then you can do that as well too.
Yep.
But otherwise, you start up what you know you want what you know you need at the beginning, and that's fine. Right? That's it, so to speak. For it.
Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, I think
I mean, you're seeing which you're doing a cond here, which backend you want, and you're starting up the children you want for that.
Right.
Well, telling the supervisor to start up the children you want for that.
Exactly. Okay. Good. And one of these, I guess both of them, in fact, or both of these two, the Bevan backend and the extemporary backend, actually both start up OS processes. Okay. And that was another question I wanted to ask you. And this is, they start them up via ports. So they do an open port, or they used to when they weren't using a different library. But I would like to ask you about the ports themselves, Erlang ports. I've used Erlang ports to communicate with other programming languages. Been phenomenal. I think that's just such a great feature. Been able to communicate with Common Lisp, with Go, with Rust, with Python. It's unbelievable. All you have to be able to do is write to standard out and read from standard out. So it's really fantastic. But in particular, this project really forced me to do a lot of interprocess communication with things on system using ports. And I was wondering, it seemed like a good idea to me to, and let's bring it up here, to initialize, during the initialization, to open the port. So to write for anything that I wanted to, where I wanted to write, have a long running OS process that I needed to be able to communicate with, either reading or writing to put it in a gen server. And so I guess that's the first part of my question. Is that a good place to do that if you're going to have state for it? Bring it up here.
Okay, you need a process when you open a port, of course, that there's a process that owns that port.
Yep.
And that's the one that gets all the message, the data coming into the port. It's the one that gets sent all that data coming in.
Right.
The data that comes in isn't in any way gen server compliant formats and stuff like this. So you're going to get all that stuff in the handle info. It's a well-defined format, but you're going to see it there. And now, now for quite a while now, you've had these port command functions, BIFs, for sending things out to the port.
Yes.
And basically any process can do that. Yeah, here you see what you're getting the data in and for various things like this for. Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean now any process, if it has the port, it can send to it. You can do a port command to it. Anything that comes back, of course, from the other operating system process will be sent to the process that owns that port. In this case, your gen server here, and it has to decide what to do with who to send it to, etc.
Right.
That means it's a little bit difficult doing synchronous messages
that's been tricky. Yeah.
In that case, it might actually be better to send the message through through the port owner process. So it can say it sends off something, then waits for a reply, right?
Mm.
Depending what the other side is. If the other side is synchronously defined in that way. If it's asynchronous, just might send stuff that comes. Then of course the owner process, the Erlang owner process, has to know what to do with that data and maybe process it itself.
Okay.
But then, so depending very much what you want to do with it, it doesn't really make much difference. I mean, you might put a state machine here. You might have a state machine talking to it. And they still have exactly the same issue, that things are going to come in from the port through the handle info.
Right.
But then, of course, you know which state you're in, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah.
Well, it's going to come in as a cast, but yeah. So you have those issues. You just have to work out for it.
And this is right here. This is a wrapper function that does a bunch of setup and then actually starts the port. So the process does belong here to the server. But is this the right place to do it, to set that up in the init function?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. But wait a minute, where are you opening the port? Sorry.
Yeah, it's the function has changed since I did this originally, but the start Bevan function.
Okay.
That's the one that's actually starting the port.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yes. Yes. I mean, if you don't do it there, then you're going to have to then the other process is going to hand over control to this process to manage the port, right?
Yep.
Which again, of course, you can do, but if there's nothing you need to do with your port before this process gets it, then might as well start directly here.
Okay.
And you're going to get an error if you can't do that. So you're trapping exits as well there as well.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah. Fine. Again, that depends what your server's doing, right? How your server wants to handle things. If it's how it's going to handle when it gets if it's linking to things. In this case, the port doesn't. I don't think generates an exit, does it?
It doesn't. But I've actually switched to Erlang exec. Since then, and that's my question. So this is a good segue. The reason I did switch to Erlang exec is because I couldn't find a good way to properly shut down an OS process automatically that I had started up in using OpenPort.
No, you can't do that. I mean, the open port starts the other OS process and then sits and communicates with it. And if you close the port from the Erlang side, then the other end, the other OS port on its input will see that its file descriptor is just closed, right? And it's up to it to handle that the file descriptor is closed, that the input descriptor is closed, and understand that this means I should die, right?
Right. And some might go ahead.
And as far as I've found out, there is no way of doing that either.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's what the Erlang exec does, but yeah.
Yes, some binaries that I had been using handled that sort of, hey, the port's been closed, go ahead and close your file descriptor. Did that just fine. Others would just stay running, and I'd have to go in and clean up all these dead zombie processes.
Yeah.
Unix.
Yeah. Then you need to do it. You need to do that in some way.
What I did find though was that there is this library called Erlang exec. I don't know if you've seen it before, but they actually have a bunch of code that supports the automatic shutting down of an OS process in the event of a closed port. There's a lot of scaffolding around it to make that happen correctly.
Do they sit in between the Erlang system and the other operating system process?
I don't know exactly. It looks like they were doing either some gen server type things or some custom looping to make their own little servers. I'd have to go back and look at the source code because I only
that I haven't seen, to be honest. So
it hasn't failed me yet. And all the OS processes now, like when I hit control or when I exit, like hit exit in the LFE REPL, where in the LFE REPL being the place where I've started all these things because I'm using an OTP release. So when I start the REPL, the release starts up, all these things are booted. And then when I exit out of the LFE REPL, it shuts everything down, the OTP application. And I go look at the process list, and all the processes that I started up on the operating system have also come down. And it's amazing to finally see that working.
Okay. Yeah. I just found Erlang exec. It's one by Sailing.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, it says execute and control OS processes from Erlang OTP. Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, I haven't tried that, but that'd be good because as we said that just closing the port does not terminate the other operating system process.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
Yeah,
do that.
exactly.
Yes.
Okay, just a quick chat. People are doing okay in chat. So what was I going to say? Yeah, I actually really like the Erlang ports API itself. This is the most I've had to dig into it. And sadly, I couldn't get the whole thing to work like we were just talking about. But still, I think it's a great API, great functionality. Wonderful tool.
It's quite nice in that, well, I mean, from the Erlang side, it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
You send bytes and you get bytes back. Literally, that's all. That's what it's all about. And the port itself, the port handling doesn't interpret those bytes in any way.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to you, both ends, to understand what data is that I'm actually sending.
Yep, the pattern matching that you get, it's phenomenal. I mean, having done this in so many other different languages and the absolute pain you have to go through, it's really fantastic to see how nicely Erlang does it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, pattern matching on binaries is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing you can do with ports is that you can set packet lengths. But normally it's just sending bytes. All the bytes it gets in will be sent off to your process immediately, and the bytes you send will be sent off immediately. But when you open it, you can actually declare packet sizes, and it will do that. The port handling will do that packeting for you.
And not only that,
if I want 64 bytes coming in, it'll sit and wait until it gets 64 bytes, then it give it to you. And the same thing out.
Right, and it also will lets you do that for line-based input that you're processing, and you can say, give me, 1,024 characters in a line. Anything after that, forget the line. But as soon as it gets the line, it brings it through, and that simplifies. If you're doing line-based stuff, of course, it simplifies a lot of work. So
the only requirement though is that the process at the other end has to do packeting on its own.
Right.
So it has to know it's doing packeting and send the packet size when it comes over and things like this for it as well too, right. and understand that when you send things, so I'm going to get 1, 2, or 4 bytes, how many saying how big the packet is and stuff like that. But apart from that, it's very simple.
I haven't actually used that feature. I've just either done straight up IO with line.
Yeah, it depends what you want to send. That's if you're doing that. It's nice. Ports are nice. They're sort of not been replaced, but a lot of people use NIFs instead now.
Yeah.
The calling of the C functions directly in.
I'm so hesitant to do that though. I guess
it's both better and worse.
Yeah.
It's better in the fact the interface is generally much faster because you're implementing it inside the Erlang system.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be slightly careful. If your NIFs take a long time, then you might have to put them in dirty schedulers and stuff like this for it. The worst bit is that if you make an error in your NIF, so a segment violation in your NIF, you'll crash the whole Erlang system. Yeah, there's no trapping at all, right? Yeah. And, so you have to be very careful what you do in the C code, right? Or the other code.
I'm not a C hacker. I mean, I can do C, but it's not going to be good. And I know to stay away from that particular weapon.
Yeah, and in that sense, so using ports, it's slower, but it's much safer. Yeah. Because if the other operating system process crashes because it's got an error in it, the worst thing that'll happen is your port will close. Yeah. And you'll just find out about that. So
most of the things that I've needed are the communication that happens back and forth inside the open ports is plenty sufficient. Yeah. I need stability more than I need any sort of speed in communication.
Yeah, I noticed that. Well, when you were demoing your system, that even though you change things, I mean, you're entering commands, but you didn't notice any of that in the music.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Okay. I think we've answered this one too. OS ports. Yep, you talked about that. All right. Sorry, folks, scrolling through. I think I answered this one. Yep, answered this one too. Great. So what's next?
I'll chime in just if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Because while we're looking around, hey, great talk yesterday. That was fantastic. And yeah, I can't wait to get my core Triton Alley hooked up to this and actually get some Erlang input recorded. Oh, what does somebody do to start to start the process? Where should I start? You can speed up somebody's hack into what you've written.
Yeah. The key things to have are make sure that you've got extempore downloaded and installed somewhere. And really that's just a binary with a folder. Make sure you've got a good recent Erlang, so 19 and above. And then Git. Trying to think, I might do a little bit of C. Yeah, I think one of the dependencies, you're going to need GCC build tools, because one of the dependencies does have, which one is it? I can't remember which dependency it is. I have to go look. But one of them does actually build some C code for it. Oh, it's the Erlang exec. Erlang exec builds some C stuff. So I let them do the NIF, so I don't have to. I trust their C, not my C. And that should be it. Then you'll just have to update the configuration, and you'll start up an LFE REPL. And this configuration is sysconfig. And if you hop into LFE Slack and join the algo sound room, I can help you with any of the details that arise. But that's really it at a basic level, is just making sure you have all the dependencies, and then you're pointing to the right directories for your configuration, your Undertone configuration, and you should be able to bring it up.
What about problems with MIDI? I know you said yesterday you're looking for people to write drivers for different synthesizers.
Yeah, so it's actually not drivers so much. Honestly, all it is really lookups for control codes. So you can send MIDI control codes, and so there's a great modular-based synthesis, open source synthesis of VC-Rack. And I don't have any of the MIDI codes for that in place. And it would be nice for people to start being able to do modular synthesis from LFE. It'd be a brilliant creative canvas to play with.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really cool, especially controlling it from the REPL. That was fun.
I'm looking forward to, I'll anticipate one of the questions I think Robert might be asking soon, but I'm looking forward to doing more REPL work. And in particular, I want to be able to do two things at once. I want to be able to take advantage of LFE while simultaneously talking to extempore, using the extempore REPL. And so basically making a hybrid REPL, which is capable of doing two Lisps at once, which sounds crazy, but I think as long as I keep it fairly well delineated, I should be able to do it without a problem.
You mean instead of running the two REPLs in parallel, have one? Or?
Have one, and I haven't quite figured out how to best manage the environment for that, because I would be skipping the LFE's environment management capabilities for this until we get the feature in LFE where if we can support callbacks in the LFE REPL, then I would be able to basically say, here is my reader function, and you just go ahead and use all of your internals for the LFE REPL, and then use my reader, and then I could do all the stuff that I wanted to do for extempore, and then when none of those patterns were matched, kick the rest off to LFE, and then LFE's environment is all there. This LFE server, REPL server is running.
Why not have two? Why have one?
Do you mean two separate servers running, or
no? Why not have two REPLs? Why would you prefer to have one REPL?
Oh, just from user experience, it's just nice to not have to switch around and just be able to type in one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, one of the REPLs can be the instrument. I spent a lot of time with Joe on the piano, and what he always wanted was to have one of the high keys actually be buttons, where you can actually programmable buttons are actually on your instrument, and then you, of course, bind them however you want.
Great.
To like start recording, stop recording, go back, replay. That's
great.
You definitely wanted. I'll say that much.
So Arturia, they make a bunch of great synths. In fact, the previous demos that I've done uses their Moog modular. It's like the System 55 from the 60s and 70s. Arturia makes that. They do a full software version of that that I use for a lot of recordings. But they also make hardware. and they offer hardware just like that, where you press a series of keys on the keyboard that are actually mapped to like different MIDI channels or whatnot. You can control your DAW with them. Yeah, it's brilliant. So that's a great idea. That would be very easy to do. Very easy to do. Yeah. So that would be fun. Yeah, there's so many things to experiment with. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay. I'll have to fix
You did
it.
the
I'll
hard
fix
work.
the
So
callbacks
proud of
in.
you for doing the hard work. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Robert, if we could get like either a reader macro and or callbacks to the REPL, I would be so excited. So I don't know if that if that
The reader macros, I could do a limited version. The problem is the reader or the parser input handler for LFE is not the same as in other Lisps. It's much more traditional in that sense. So I could do something where you could define a reader macro, say #G or whatever it might be, and then you would get one term after that, and then you could process that term and do something with it. You'd have to return something in the input, maybe just nil or whatever, but that would be doable. But having where you hand over control to reading, that would not be doable with the current IO system, or how the input is handled, right? Rather,
not as like a reader macro, right?
No, it would be a very limited reader macro. You could program and say, yeah, if I get a #G, I'll get the next term, whatever that might be, and I can do something with it.
I would still like that. I would still like that. Yeah.
That level would work.
But what about also like adding the capability to the LFE shell, LFE undershell, to have callbacks that it could actually.
You mean in that sense, it could look at what it gets in, what it reads, and say, if it's this, call something.
Or if LFE was started with a flag that said, use this for the reader callback, then it would, if it could find that function during startup, then LFE would just run and call that reader.
Okay, I mean, so can you plug in your own readers?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be too difficult at all to do.
I would love that. Oh, it would.
But then you have to handle the reader in such a way that it does the right thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's be doable. Slightly have to work out a way to do that, but it'd be perfectly doable to do it. Now, for those who don't know, there are actually 3 processes in the REPL.
Yeah.
You've got a little master process up here, and you've got one process that does all the evaluation, and you have another process that does the reading. So you'd have to be able to tell the master that the reader process doesn't call LFE IO : read, it calls whatever you might want to call, and get input characters from that.
And what's so lovely about that particular design too is that if there is a problem at any one of those stages, you don't end up crashing the whole LFE server. Yeah, you just like that one eval breaks and doesn't work for whatever reason, bad stuff, everything keeps working.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we don't. Well, we crash things, but we start them up again.
We start them up. Yeah, it's quite beautiful. Yeah. If you're interested in the internals of LFE, that's a fun place. Oh, hey, that's actually a good segue for another question I had for you. For somebody coming into LFE for the first time who wants to dive in and get to know pieces of the system, where might you send them first?
That's a bit of a problem in the sense that most of what exists in the actual LFE system, the bit I've done, if I put it this way, is at the low level interfacing what you write in LFE with Erlang. I mean, there's the LFE IO for parsing input and formatting output and stuff like this, but a lot of it's in the compilation and reading LFE files and translating them to Erlang and going backwards and forwards for it. So that's very low level at that level. There are very few libraries in there. I mean, standard libraries for people to use to add. There are basically 2 at the moment. There's a common Lisp interface and a closure interface libraries for it. They're the only ones that exist that aren't part of the actual low-level implementation of it. If you know what's going on in the Erlang system, then you could go in and work with that. If you don't, it's pretty hardwired, if I put it this way. There'd be nothing stopping people writing extra libraries. If you want to interface something from LFE, write a library to do that, right? And well, well, I think I mentioned before, having something that uses LXC's Phoenix and Ecto. Be perfectly possible to do that. There's no big deal. But as far as I understand, they're very macro. The interface is very macro based, which would fit very well to write a set of LFE macros that access it in a similar way. Or the NX, which Jose's been talking about now, that would be very interesting to do as well, because I think that's also partially macro based as well too, for how that works and internal compilations and things like this. That would be very interesting to have as well too.
Yeah.
So I see a very good potential for that, to use that.
I'm very excited about using that with LFE. I'm sorry, with Undertone and LFE. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that'd be a lot of fun to have that. I think that will open up a lot of things, new types of applications that can be run from the Erlang, the Beam system. And if you can do that from Erlang, if you do that from LFE, fine, right? That actually might be one thing that LFE would be better to use than Erlang. Because the Erlang macros, for those who haven't worked on it, are very simple. They're quite trivially simple, actually. Sort of like a simplified C macros. Whereas, of course, with LFE, you have real macros. So you can do whatever you want there. You can define new functions, do other things as well. All types of stuff with it. So, yeah. So that would be very interesting to do. I'm just trying to find out how the interface looks at a lower level. See if we can get some more of that. So anyone's interested, join the LEF thing and get onto the interoperability and the machine learning in the Slack there, and look at those. That'd be quite.
Just join that Slack. They're their room.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, they're in there, so you can join them now. It's quite free to join them now as well too. So just getting on the Slack.
So
that would.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, I was going to say, we were just speaking of macros, so there is a question that's related to that. Have you ever been tempted to create a DSL in LFE for any part of Erlang or OTP?
Not the base system, no. One, I know it. The thing I'm using, I know it, and I suppose you could write something. The question would be, why?
Right.
Why use a macro or write a DSL? And you suppose you could package things with it, but that'd be about it. Otherwise, the interface is very functionally oriented anyway. Right? It's not like you're doing strange stuff and building big data structures or processing data structures at compile time or however you want to do these things for.
Right.
Typically not doing that. It's just not designed in that way, right? The closer you can get to things like that using the eUnit package, which again works by macros, but they're pretty complex macros. But,
I think I might, early on in my time with Erlang, I was quite tempted to write a DSL for OTP. Mostly because at the time maps were not part of Erlang and all the parameters were positional. And
which one? Sorry,
when you start up an OTP, when you're like setting up supervisors and the various behaviors,
yeah.
parameters for all those were positional in nature. And
okay, yeah.
And it was just like, there's no. But with maps, that sort of becomes a non-issue because now you have a description of what it is, and
and you have default values that are generally quite reasonable. So if you don't have to do everything, a lot of necessity's gone away in that sense. Yeah,
exactly.
But languages are fun, but have to know why you're doing it. I mean, doing it for the fun of it is a very good reason. I'm not saying against that at all, but so you know where you're going.
What would you say that you've learned the most from writing various languages?
I think I think that I think it's fun. I'm not doubting that. I enjoyed developing Erlang. I enjoyed developing LFE and Luerl and Erlang as well too. They're a lot of fun to do that. I think you need to keep track of where you're going. Otherwise, it's so extremely simple just to wander off and have lots of stuff get in, and you maybe not lose clear path of where you want to go, what you want to have in your language, what it should do. There's a tale, I don't know if it's true, that Francesco sometimes says. Mike Williams, he said his most important thing was to keep track of Joe and me so we didn't add too much junk into the language, right? Because we're having fun. I don't know if that's true or not, but probably. But it's just very easy to do it, and just stay. It's not easy actually staying focused. What am I after? What I want to do with it, and that's the most difficult bit. But when you do that, it's a lot of fun doing it, and you can just do it for testing an idea and see. Only comment is, which I've found, of course, is that doing something that tests your idea, that's easy, right? That's the fun bit in that sense, because I want to test this. Can I do something like this? You bump your hacks together something, and I can do it, and I say, yes, great. The worst bit is the getting it if you want to productify it, make it a product level and reliable for it. That's where all the tricky bits come in, and finding all the errors and the cases and making sure you handle everything in the right way or a suitable way anyway, and things like this for it. Well, that's the effort. That's the effort bit to it.
The fit and finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, same thing with LFE, hacking it together so I could parse lists and have a simple macro thing. That was quite easy, right?
Right. That happened in the first few months of the project, right?
Yeah. That was easy for it. But making it safe enough and to actually be used seriously, like generating music without crashing the system when you happen to write something weird, right? That's the difficult bit for it. Yeah. It's satisfying when it works, but slightly nervous too. Yeah.
I think we might be right at time. All right, is it the half past, right?
Yeah, that's when it's supposed to stop.
Okay.
I don't know if Eva's going to come in and kill us if we don't, but never mind. Any more questions from people?
Right.
Well, until we'll keep going until they tell us to stop us, right? So, but yeah.
I think
One more minute, please.
Okay, great. So the only thing that I didn't ask you, I think it's sort of a follow-on of the last question, but it seems that every few years we do see a new a new creative effort at implementing a language on the Beam. And what advice would you give to future language designers that are interested in providing a new take on a Beam language?
Basically the same thing. Work out why, what do I want to do and why?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, as I said, for fun, I find that a perfectly reasonable excuse or reason to build something. But if you want to make it something you want to spread, why am I doing this? What? Okay. So you're running on the Beam. That restricts things if you want to do them efficiently. I mean, the Beam and Erlang are like this, right? The Beam implements Erlang, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to do something that is very efficient on the Beam, it's basically Erlang, whether it's Elixir or LFE or whatever you might do, and the other functional languages are coming now at that level. If you want to do something which is different semantics, different data handling, then you have to do the work yourself, and it's not that efficient. Too fast for it. So work out what you want to do and why you want to do it, and so you know where you're going. And so you can also see, have I got there?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going the right path or not? But that's yeah.
Excellent. Good advice.
Yeah, and I mean, so it's great having new languages in that sense. I mean, if you look at Elixir, of course, which has become extremely successful, it had a goal, it had a target as well of what was in there. Why not use Erlang? Why use Elixir? What should Elixir look like and do to make it well better than Erlang, or different than Erlang? How you want to see it, right? They had that view for it, and now you have these strictly statically typed functional languages that are coming, which want to, amongst other things, add a proper type system to it. That's fine, right? But just understand what you're doing, and also how you can get to interact with other things as well, the other languages.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you do, you don't want to rewrite OTP. I mean, you can, there's nothing stopping you, but you don't really want to do that. If you look at Elixir and LFE, they're layers on top. So they'll use what's under them when they want to. Maybe they might replace some other things or have other interfaces, but it's still running on the same basic system.